Now, you might already know this, but nearly 60% of adults in the United States no longer plan to have children. Of course, this phenomenon is not unique to the United States. In fact, birth rates around the world in most developed countries have been dropping, and the United States is no exception. Those top 5 reasons that people do not want to have children in the United States. Number 1, they just don't want to. Number 2, they want to focus on other things. Number 3, concerns about the state of the world. Number 4, they couldn't afford to raise a child or feel like they couldn't afford to raise a child. And somewhat related to number 3, number 5 is concerns about the environment. This being a personal finance channel, I'll focus on those individuals at number 4 on this list for the 57% of Americans that do not plan to have children, that feel that they could not afford to have children. Why is that? First, Americans were surveyed looking at the 3 traditional milestones of adulthood in the United States, and here's what they thought was the best age for marriage, becoming a parent, and purchasing a home in the United States. On average, Americans said the best age to get married is around 27 or 26 and a half. The average best age to become a parent then is age 27, and Americans said the average best age to purchase a home is around 29. Now, why might Americans feel that they can't afford to raise a child in the United States? A 2017 study from the USDA, or U.S. Department of Agriculture, looked at the cost to raise a child from 0 to age 18, estimating that it would take a total of around $233,000, not including the cost of college education. With inflation, this figure has only increased. In fact, a 2025 study by LendingTree found that the cost to raise a child was up just over 1 year, up 25% to nearly $300,000. LendingTree also looked at the cheapest states shown here to raise a child in the United States and the most expensive states to raise a child in the United States shown here. The majority of those costs, at least for the first 0 to 5 years, is childcare. Here's the cost of childcare by month around the United States, with the most expensive in Massachusetts and or Hawaii, depending on which study you look at, costing over $30,000 a year just for childcare alone. Another study from Credit News to complete our range found that the cost to raise a child could be over $400,000. So, looking at our ranges, the cost to raise a child in the United States, a study from 2017 found that it could be as low, I guess I'll say that in quotes, as low as $233,000 all the way up to over $400,000. Investopedia looked at the total cost of the American dream, including childcare, and their estimate, which does include 2 children and the cost of college, is $832,000 found here. Why might the average American feel that they can't cover those costs? Well, the average full-time worker, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, makes around $45,000 a year. Even when we look at average salaries around the United States, shown here on the right, that still only puts us at a total income of around $63,000 a year, according to USA Today. Here we have median household income. Now, a household doesn't necessarily guarantee that these individuals are married, but the median household income can give us an estimate of what the median or middle experience is for Americans in the United States. Here's a breakdown by age of head of household. In total, around the United States, with median household income being around $80,000 and average household income being around $114,000. Now, speaking of households, going back to our adult milestones as recommended by Americans around the United States, the best age to buy that home is 29. But why might Americans feel that that is too expensive? Well, according to most studies, the average salary you need to buy a home in the United States is over 6 figures if you want to keep your home cost or mortgage below the recommendation of 30% of your salary. In fact, an analysis from NBC News found that in about 30 states in the United States, you need an income in excess of 6 figures. In fact, homeowners in those states already, according to census data, have a household income over 6 figures just to afford a home in that state. And again, to complete our range, a study from Bankrate with the highest range saying that the average salary in the United States is closer to $117,000 to afford the median priced home in that region. When looking at actual home buyer data, the salaries of household income is around $97,000 in total, and reaching a new high, first-time home buyers are a median age of 38 years old. But the average age for first marriage in the United States hasn't been near 26 since at least the 2000s. As of 2025, the average marrying age for men is closer to 31 and closer to 29 for women. And marriage rates in the United States have been dropping since 1949 when they reached their peak at around 78%, reaching their low in 2022 of around 46%. The good news is that divorce rates have also been falling. And while the age of first marriage does vary widely around the United States, the only two states where it's younger than 26 or around 26 are Utah and Arkansas. As a result, single women actually own more homes than single men, exceeding the ownership of single men by almost 3 million. And contrary to online rumors, this does not have to do with divorce. In fact, the home ownership among single women increased while marriage rates went down and divorce rates went down. The annual study from LindyTree found that women simply prioritize home ownership more than single men. And another contributing factor is that, at least in the United States, women tend to outlive men, whether single or married, giving them more time for home ownership. Keeping in mind that financial security is still the number one reason that people get married in the United States, with love still making the list at number 3. And while lack of family support and infidelity top the list for the reasons of divorce, we still find financial stress in the top 5. So while typically the easiest way to increase wealth in the past was through marriage, with marriage households having about 3 times the median net worth of single households, the high or a new high of Americans are now having reached age 40 having never married. In fact, a quarter of Americans will reach age 40 this year having never said I do. But the good news is, I guess, one study did find that getting or having a dog, and I assume a cat, although not studied in this study, is just as good as getting married for my pet owners out there. There is a state of the world, and while the state of the world has been improving in most metrics, however, wealth seems to be continually concentrated among smaller and smaller group of individuals, leaving a larger and larger group of individuals feeling like they either cannot afford or cannot establish through these milestones of home ownership. Even as an independent individual, home ownership, children, or marriage, all happening later. And as these milestones get pushed out, I think this infographic from Our World in Data summarizes it well, that all 3 things can be true. The world is awful, the world is much better, and the world can be much better. And finally, at number 1, the number 1 reason that people don't want to have children is they simply don't want to. And I'm not sure how we make a cultural shift away from that, but I'm definitely interested in hearing from you. So drop a comment below for a feature in my next video.